Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. We are going to do a brief recap of January 19th through the 21st. The weekend numbers came in this morning. Just the estimates, the actuals will come out tomorrow afternoon. So we'll walk through the top 10, talk a little bit about the Oscar films and see how they're doing, and sort of the art house circuit. And then we'll talk briefly about what is coming out next week. So let's start with the top 10 for this weekend, January 19th through 21st. Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle comes in at number 1. Just over $20 million for the weekend. A fantastic 29% drop. This is its 5th weekend, remember. Its total so far is just about $317 million. Completely against any projections, totally outside any expectation of what this film would do. My guess is that Sony thought a good run for Jumanji would be like 150 to 200 overall, and now it's, crashing through 300. It's going to beat like Thor Ragnarok. Really surprising across the board. And I talked a little bit about why the last couple of podcasts, why I think Jumanji is doing so well. But the two things that the one thing that sticks out in my head more than anything is that it feels like an old school run of a good word of mouth film. This is what you would see often. I'm trying to think back to when box office runs like this were most prominent. It's probably before 2002. So 2002, 2000 to 2004 is kind of peak box office. That's when admissions were the highest they've ever been, I think, in modern history. I guess in at least the last 30 years. So 2002, that sort of area is when a lot of things changed after 2002. And the way that movies performed at the box office is a lot different now than it was, say, in 1995 or 1996, right? 20 plus years ago. Jumanji is reminding me of what movies normally used to do. They may not open super, super high, but they play for a really strong 2 months, 8-week run, where the drops aren't massive. They're sub 50%, and it just sort of sticks around, right? And people really enjoy the film. They talk about it because you have to remember back then, 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't the internet really. I mean, 20 years ago there was, but it wasn't, not a ton of people had broadband and stuff like that. It wasn't as pervasive as it is now. And even before that, you think to the early 90s, there wasn't the internet. Right. And so people communicated on a lot slower fashion. And so films were rolled out for longer runs. And if a film did well, it usually did well because it had great legs. It performed great, week 3 through week 8. As opposed to now where everything seems to be super, super front loaded just because of social media hype. Think of movies like Captain America Civil War, like huge opening for what it was. 170 million something, multiplier was sub 2.4, right? So like that's sort of what the typical blockbuster movie is doing these days. But we've had a couple of exceptions this year. We've had Wonder Woman have outrageous legs through the summer. Spider-Man as well, very surprising, opened I think well below expectations on that film and ended up doing pretty well. Jumanji is playing like those films and playing like the old run, how the box office was in like the mid 90s. People really enjoyed this film. They're telling other people about it. I find it fascinating because something has had to change in our culture where a word of mouth film like Jumanji or say like Hidden Figures, totally different types of films, but had both had great long legs in their box office run. And I sort of wonder now with social media and the way hype is, what makes a movie like Jumanji sort of keep going, right? Because you would think the way our news cycle runs now, it's no longer a 24 hours news cycle, it's like an hour news cycle with social media and Twitter. Like sometimes it feels like less than an hour. It's just, in the Trump era of news, everything moves so much quicker. So you would assume even if a movie was well received, it would kind of burn out pretty quickly in the first few weeks. But Jumanji is not only playing strong through the holiday season, it's now playing strong into the doldrums of January. And it could play strong all the way to the next peak we're going to have, which will be the Valentine's Day weekend when Black Panther comes out. Until then, we're kind of a little bit of valley, but it looks like Jumanji is going to play strong all the way through that. which absolutely nobody would have predicted a few weeks ago or a few months ago. It's just kind of out of the blue. Like artier films or sort of prestige family films like Hidden Figures, yeah, it makes sense. But Jumanji, I mean, what? But why? You know, that's the question that keeps popping up in my head. In any event, it is doing well, and we will keep track of it as it continues to lead the box office here. Number 2 was a new movie, 12 Strong from Warner Brothers, a war movie, I believe about the Afghan war. 16.5 million on the weekend in about 3,000 theaters. Its opening weekend per theater average was just about $5,500. You know, coming into the weekend, the expectations for this film were not huge. I think mostly they were hoping for mid-teens, maybe a breakout in the low 20s, mid-20s. That didn't happen. It sort of hit expectations. Just not fantastic and not terrible. Kind of your typical genre movie release in January. They don't really know where else to put it. They know it's going to do okay. They want it to be in the theaters just so it like gets enough recognition so it can make more money. Probably on home entertainment would be my guess. You know, on VOD, DVD, streaming, and stuff like that. It just did not have the feel of a big blockbuster film, and it seems like it was just being dumped here in January, and kind of a random January weekend. But its performance is not that bad. You would expect, though, with the stars in it, Chris Hemsworth, Michael Shannon, Michael Payne is not really a star, but he's kind of a good character actor, very recognizable. War movies just have not played well over the last few years. You know, outside of something like, I think over the last decade, you know, obviously the standouts are going to be American Sniper. Hurt Locker won Best Picture, but it honestly didn't make that much money. War movies just are not palatable these days, especially when they're about wars that are still being fought. Even more recent, like Thank You for Your Service did not do well. Megan Levy, was that a war movie about Kate Marr and a dog in Iraq or something? I don't know. That didn't do that well either. And this one is sort of, I think it's performing to expectations, but I think you take a step back and it's like, you know, where are war films going recently? I haven't seen a good war film. You'd think we've been fighting these wars for so long, there would be art coming out of these conflicts that would rival what we did in Vietnam, or sorry, the art that came out in reaction to Vietnam. And honestly, it's not there. Like, and maybe the soldiers who fought in it and the people who have been involved hadn't had enough time to really process it yet, or maybe the fact the war is still going on. Both wars are still going on, and probably another one in Syria. Who knows where else with Trump in office? You know, I would expect that the art would get better, but it's not. And 12 Strong is not an example of a great movie or artistic movie. It's your typical sort of war action genre flick. People liked it though. A audience score. I don't even know if it has. Let's see what it has on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't even see it on here, unfortunately. Oh, 53% Rotten Tomatoes. I'll just mention the audience score. No, I think it's kind of bullshit. 73% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics were sort of mixed about it. Top critics liked it a little bit more, slightly on the fresh side from top critics. Cinema score of A. So it's gonna play okay. Maybe like a 2.5x, maybe 3, because it opened a little bit lower than probably had hoped. I would say that opening's a little bit depressed. So maybe good word of mouth will kick in. Maybe reaches to $50 million domestically, but I honestly feel like this movie's just going to make more on home entertainment anyway. It's like it's almost like an advertisement for the VOD rental that you're going to get in 3 months. So that was number 2 this weekend, 12 Strong. Number 3 was Den of Thieves, which is essentially a knockoff of the movie Heat. It looks like there's been so many knockoff of Heat. Heat has to be one of the most influential films of the last 20 years, at least. Last 20 years. I guess it was 20 years ago when it came out. There's been so many. 999 was another one. But Den of Thieves did pretty well for STX, the sort of newer big studio. 15.3 million, only in about 2,400 theaters. So kind of a muted wide release here. STX is kind of like probably hedging their bets a bit. Per theater average is decently healthy for a film like this. 6,300 per theater. A little bit surprising. I think STX the expectation was low teens and maybe realistically high single digits. Hitting 15's not bad. Cinema score in terms of like legs and word of mouth, B+. The Rotten Tomatoes score, it's like whenever I want the Rotten Tomatoes score, it always like escapes me. 42% on Rotten Tomatoes. Not a lot of people reviewed it though. Would suggest that either people don't care or the critics don't care or they didn't do a critic screening. 82% Rotten Tomatoes score if we want to count that. I'm kind of interested in the Metacritic scores for these films. It looks like 55% or 55 score for 12 Strong, which is all right. It's not terrible. It's not great. 50 score for Den of Thieves. That's actually higher than I thought it would be. God, this just feels like the Commuter last weekend. Just genre action flicks just thrown out on the screen, make 30, 40, 50 million bucks and everybody's happy and everybody gets a nice piece of the profit. This is just as old as the movie business has existed. There's been genre flicks like this that do pretty well. They don't break out and make $100 million, but they do well enough to get a nice profit. And that's essentially what 12 Strong, Den of Thieves, and The Commuter are all about, just sort of breaking even and making a nice little chunk of change, which I think they all do. So number 4 this weekend was The Post, 12.1 million. I guess it's its second or third week of wide expansion. I thought they should have put this one out on wide on Christmas, but they didn't. 12.1 million, lost about 37%, which is higher than you want. It didn't lose any theaters either. Per theater average is an okay 4,300. Total take so far is, let's see, $45 million. Now, if this was a typical art film that was just meant for prestige stuff, just meant for Oscar race, and it had a lower production budget, I would say, all right, it's doing pretty well. If you compared this to like 3 Billboards or I, Tonya or Phantom Thread or even Lady Bird, it's beating those films. But, it's Tom Hanks, it is Spielberg, it's Meryl Streep. Production budget was like $50 million. So it doesn't ring as much as a success as it may on just sort of just looking at the total box office so far. Because I think $45 million for which is essentially an art prestige flick, not bad. But when you put it into context, it's not super great. And that drop is way too high. 37% on an art film like this that's supposed to be playing strong all the way through the Oscars, which are still, a month and a week away. So, okay performance. I would say decent performance. Definitely not a flop, but I think it's performing a little bit under the expectation there. Coming at number 5 this weekend was The Greatest Showman with a fantastic 12% drop, even losing 115 theaters. $11 million for the weekend. Total so far for The Greatest Showman is just about $114 million. So this one started out very slow, looked like it could be in flop territory, and it's completely done a 180. Now it's really excelling in its 5th weekend, over $100 million. The production budget was high on this. It was $84 million. There was a lot of marketing involved. It was not a low-cost sort of art film or anything like that. It was sort of meant to be a holiday blockbuster, and they promoted it that way. It did not start out doing that hot, but now it is sort of rolling in with like a 12% drop. That suggests, and I can't remember what it was last week, and I'll look it up real quick. It's been having these ridiculously low drops. Let's see. 11, basically 12% this weekend. 9% the weekend before, 11% the weekend before. So this is really a word of mouth smash hit at this point. When you have drops that low, it just suggests that people are loving the film, talking to other people on social media or in person or whatever, and these other people are going to see it, or it's even repeat visitors and stuff like that, or repeat customers, I should say. The question though is like, is this repeat people, or is it spreading via new people, via word of mouth? I'm not really sure. The quality of the film itself didn't seem that great, but there's something about it. I would love to get the demographics on this film. Who is going to see this movie? Who's the repeat audience? My guess is it's kind of more like middle America types, like outside big cities or smaller big cities. let's throw out like Scottsdale, Arizona, or Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Like maybe places like that, I think it's like playing well because I don't know, it kind of has a feeling of just like pure popcorn entertainment. Like there's clearly no bite or edge to this film, and I think anybody who's seen it can testify to that. It's just sort of a whitewashing of what the circus was all about, but it's like very fun and exuberant, and it's like edited very well, so it doesn't drag at all. It's kind of an old school movie, and I think it's playing well with audiences who are into that, and that audience probably isn't like urbanites in New York City. It's just not. So it's kind of I think middle America word of mouth hit is what it is. And you really can't complain with making over $100 million. When I think you started out, what was opening weekend? Opening weekend was $8.8 million. And that was the Christmas Eve weekend or Christmas weekend. So I'm sure Fox was super happy about this performance. Complete turnaround. Coming at number 6 this weekend was Paddington 2, and its second weekend, $8.2 million. A decent 25% drop. That's actually really good. But the problem is it was so depressed when it opened. It did not pop off at all opening weekend. And so it kind of makes sense that it's dropping a little bit smaller because people are just finding out about it for some reason. $25 million so far. Not at all playing to what Warner Brothers wanted it to do. It was a Weinstein film, but got passed over Warner Brothers. You know, Paddington 2 is more of a British UK property. And so I think it plays better over there and probably Canada as well. Here in the States, it just Paddington doesn't have that necessarily brand. I think there's brand recognition for Paddington, but there's not a lot of brand hype for it. Like everybody kind of knows who Paddington Bear is, but people aren't that excited about the Paddington Bear cinematic universe. So it's doing okay, but it's not doing that great. Number 7 was The Commuter. Talked a little bit about this one before. Kind of lumped it in with 12 Strong and Den of Thieves from Lionsgate. Did about $6.7 million for the weekend. An okay 51% drop. I thought the drop would be higher than that because the reception was not fantastic. Total take so far is about $25.7 million. Per theater average is okay, $2,300 per theater. That kind of does not bode well in the long run in terms of keeping it in the theater. It probably has about 2 more weeks before it starts massively dropping off. Coming in at number 8 this weekend was Star Wars: The Last Jedi, $6.7 million, a 44% drop, which isn't terrible. It is losing theaters, lost about 600 theaters, still in about 2,500. Per theater average for the weekend was about $2,700. Total take so far for Star Wars is $604 million. I don't know. What do we think about Star Wars? The Last Jedi is such a hard movie to read. And here's my sort of take on it, sort of holistic take on it, if we try to take a step back and think about it big picture wise. In and of itself, it's a huge win. It'll make $200 million in profit for Disney, no question in my mind. So The Last Jedi, in and of itself, a very successful film across the board. Massively successful film, let's be honest. The real test to its sort of influence on the rest of the series is maybe even a little bit more interesting. I think we all knew The Last Jedi was going to be a big win. But where I'm interested to see is how Solo plays earlier this year, or next year, I should say. I guess it's not even next year, it's this May. So it's supposed to come out in this May. I don't think that it is. I think it's going to get pushed back to December or maybe in the fall. There's no way they can finish it by May. So The Last Jedi, its broader implications are important in terms of how the audience reaction was to the film. You know, it was mixed by some people. Some people loved it. Some people hated it. In general, the vibe that I get from sort of the more, let's say, cultured people was that it wasn't that great. It wasn't terrible. It was just kind of a meh feeling from a lot of people who go to see a lot of movies. They didn't feel like it was that outstanding. And I think that will affect a little bit how Solo is received and maybe even how episode 9 will be received. So for the time being, The Last Jedi is a big win and Disney's super happy, but it may end up affecting the Solo movie and the next episode of Star Wars, but we will see. But a big win for right now. Number 9 this weekend was Insidious: The Last Key, $6 million, a 52% drop, which is a really good drop actually for a horror film on its third weekend. It did lose 600 theaters, so it's starting to disappear. Per theater average was $2,300. Total take so far for Insidious: Last Key, a wonderful $58, almost $59 million. Blumhouse and Universal, in the same way that Disney and Marvel have this wonderful relationship, I guess the same company, but you know what I mean. Marvel prints money and so does Blumhouse. I mean, Marvel understands how to make a huge tentpole blockbuster film so well that they're almost always successful. Blumhouse and Universal get how to make cheap horror films. $58 million. The production budget was like 10. And oftentimes they're a lot lower. They're like $5 million for these movies. And they just, you gotta think like just box office alone, they're going to hit their profit, which is pretty rare, I feel like, for most movies. And then everything else, VOD, streaming rights, pay cable rights, is all gravy to them. They're all that's all pure profit. So another win from Blumhouse and Universal. It might end up being, someone was saying online that it might be the biggest Insidious film. I don't know if that's true or not. I have to check on that. Number 10 was Forever My Girl, a new one from Roadside Attraction. I'm guessing this is a Christian film, just because I didn't see anything about it. I'm not even gonna look it up because I don't even care. It's a PG movie. I'm looking at like the poster now, and it's like it's gotta be a Christian film, but maybe not. Who knows what it's about? I don't even really care. Production budget was super low, $3.5 million. Made 4.7 this weekend. Small wide release, just about 1,100 theaters. Per theater average was okay, 4,200. For a movie that probably wasn't really marketed at all, not a terrible performance. It kind of seems like a straight to VOD movie to me, to be honest, just looking at all the collateral about it. But an okay performance. So that's the top 10. I think some like takeaways from the top 10. The Greatest Showman's drop is phenomenal and really surprising how well it's been doing here in the last couple of weeks. The genre flicks are doing okay. Commuter, 12 Strong, Den of Thieves, Insidious. That's your typical January fare. Throw out a couple horror movies, a couple action movies, make that 40, 50 million bucks and make some profit. Jumanji continuing to have just an amazing run. A super strange run that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but maybe it will as the weeks go on. And Star Wars Last Jedi sort of starting to end its run at about 600, probably end up at well over about 620-ish, I think. We will see. So that's the top 10. Nothing too outrageous or surprising besides those holdovers from the holidays, which are definitely outliers to a normal box office run. Let's talk a little bit about the award season and what's going on with that. So I talked about The Post. It's doing pretty well, but based on the prestige of the film and who's involved and the production budget, not necessarily a home run. Outside of that, Phantom Thread expanded wide to just about 900 theaters. Did not do very well. Per theater average was $3,700. Made about $3.4 million on the weekend. Total so far is $6.1 million. Not a great performance at all, to be honest with you. Not sure what the production budget was, but based on the director and Daniel Day-Lewis, you would think this would have a much bigger play. Like, this is the same duo that brought us There Will Be Blood, which is one of the greatest films of the last 40 years probably. And so people were super psyched about Phantom Thread. The moment the trailer dropped, I knew it wasn't going to do very well because it seemed like a BBC Sunday afternoon masterpiece theater thing. It seemed way too stuffy, way too quiet, and really kind of disconnected with what's going on in the culture right now. And that's not to say it's a bad movie. I think all the critics love it. It is definitely an art house film. It just has not captured any of the general population, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's not going on to win a lot of awards. It just has not, even within sort of the artist community and the people who vote on those awards, it has not really popped off at all. I, Tonya also expanded into about 800 theaters this weekend. Did okay, $3 million. Per theater average was very similar to Phantom Thread. just about $3,800 per theater. This one, I thought this one might take off more. It's being distributed by Neon, which is a pretty brand new distributor. Just has not, it had some good wins at the Golden Globes. It just has not connected with people. And Tanya Harding's been in the news constantly, which I think is just so weird. I don't understand what young people and like their weird, I don't know, they see someone on the news and they think just because they're on their news that like they have integrity or something. It's so strange. Like Tanya Harding on the news explaining herself. Who cares? Like she like committed multiple felonies and conspired to basically, attack another person to prevent them, prevent another person from fulfilling their dreams. Like with physical violence. Like it's one of the most disgusting things, that's been in the news in the last 20, 30 years. It was just vile stuff. And I don't know, the general audiences have not responded to the film whatsoever. And so Tanya may have a chance for a couple of maybe supporting actress in the Oscars, but honestly, I kind of doubt it. It's just not popping off at all. $14 million so far for Neon. The Shape of Water, again, another kind of mysterious film in terms of its run. Fox Searchlight, I thought it would be much, much bigger than this. Only did $2.2 million this weekend. A decent 22% drop. That's not too bad. It did add 130 theaters, but per theater average is $2,600. Like, that's a joke. It's in its 8th weekend. Like, who decided to release this film this way? It just makes zero sense. $30 million total so far. This should easily be a $50-60 million movie. The quality is there. The quality of the marketing was there. I think this Fox Searchlight really botched up how they released this film. I would have held it till Christmas. Like, hold it to Christmas, pop it out, New York, Los Angeles, a couple limited, maybe a weekend or two, and then go super wide. Go 3,000, go 3,500. Who cares? And maybe it doesn't do massively well, but it'll get you up into that, that $40-50 million range, I think. And then you have a chance for word of mouth, right? Because now word of mouth for this film, because it was rolled out so slowly, never had a chance to pick up. Like, I got it here in Nashville maybe a month ago, and I went to go see it, and I showed up early. I was meeting a friend. I showed up early, bought a ticket, and she's like, oh, it's first of all, it's in this Belcourt in Nashville, which is like, used to be an old hip theater. Now they rebuilt the whole thing, and it's kind of like going to the art museum. It's so weird. And kind of totally against what going into the movies is all about, to be honest with you. A movie theater should not be well lit. I'm sorry. It's just like, this is not a museum. This is not like, for presenting paintings. It's like a movie theater should have kind of a dank, dark feeling to it, like an old movie house. They don't get that over there. In any event, so I go to see The Shape of Water. I get there early, I buy a ticket. She's like, oh, it's in the small screening room. I was like, what the hell does that mean? Well, apparently the small screening room has like 30 seats. So even in a city of like, I don't know how big we are in Nashville, 1.5 million or something like that, decent sized city, the only way I can see like Shape of Water anywhere near the city center is like this little tiny theater. It just doesn't make any sense. It had a much bigger footprint, this film, cultural footprint, even before it came out, than that. And I don't know. I think Fox Searchlight really, really sort of screwed it up. I think Shape of Water had a chance to do a lot better, and it hasn't. It did win the Producers Guild Award for Best Film, I believe, this weekend. So fingers crossed, still a dark horse for Best Picture. I don't know, though, with that bad performance at the box office, I don't see it happening. 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing did a big expansion because it won the Golden Globe for Best Film, I guess Best Drama. $2 million this weekend, a 20% drop. It's not doing anything. It's sitting at the Mendoza line at $2,000 per theater, like total joke. I don't know what they were thinking. Like somehow, I guess that worked maybe 20 years ago or like 15 years ago, where a movie wins Golden Globes, in between the Golden Globes and the Oscars, and you do a wide expansion, it makes a lot more money. I think Moonlight did that too. It just doesn't work anymore. They throw it out to a lot more theaters. Not a lot more people are going to see it. Per theater average is where a movie is going to start getting removed from theaters and be like, why would I put 3 Billboards on when I can put The Commuter on or The Greatest Showman? Like, there's no point. So not a great performance. Still stuck at $32 million. Now, keep in mind, these are all doing okay, right? I feel super negative about these films. I just feel like the potential for these films was a lot bigger. Shape of Water is at $30 million. Billboards is at 32. Lady Bird is definitely closing out its run now. Just about $2,000 per theater. Total so far is $39 million. So it's all the money in the world, $24 million total. Not great. Disaster Artist, $20 million. Downsizing is kind of an outlier. Had a really massive budget, $70 million budget, only did $24 million so far, and it's basically closing out. Then the Florida Project at 5.6. So there's definitely these different tiers of films, right? You have like Phantom Thread and the Florida Project down at the bottom, which are like really renowned from critics, but did not connect outside the big city audiences at all. Then you have like the movies that did pretty well, like Disaster Artist did 20. I thought it was going to do a lot more than that. It popped off a lot in opening weekend, but sort of disappeared rapidly. So that did okay. All the Money in the World did okay. Still kind of on the lower run here. And then you get into sort of the more successful films like Lady Bird, Three Billboards, Shape of Water comparatively. I thought it could do 50, 60 easy. I, Tonya sitting at 14, kind of that lower tier. I love taking a step back. I love talking about this stuff and then be like, get into the weeds and be like, okay, let's take like a 1,000-foot view. Call Me by Your Name, sitting at 9.2 million. If I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, box office does have some effect on how the Academy votes. It really does. If I'm seeing this, I'm thinking Lady Bird now is a favorite. I'm thinking Lady Bird is a favorite for Best Actress. Could be for Best Director, Greta Gerwig, and could be a favorite for Best Film now, because according to the expectations of that film, the expectations for Lady Bird were probably $10 million tops, and it's quadrupled that, right? Three Billboards is different. Fox Searchlight's much bigger than A24. The expectation was that Three Billboards would probably make $20-30 million. It sort of met that, right? It's right in that zone. But Lady Bird has really exceeded expectations. And I think that matters. Call Me by Your Name, I think, is gone under its expectations. Can't even hit a $2,000 per theater average on a wide expansion. I mean, what a freaking joke. And it's a wonderful movie. So I think that's going to go by the wayside. And I think we're going to be focusing on Lady Bird for the next 6 weeks until the Oscars. I think it's, Shape of Water is my favorite before. I think it's Lady Bird now. And I think the box office performance has excelled, help excel it or put it past these other films. So that's the Oscar race. I don't want to go on too long about that. I already have. Let's talk a little bit about what is coming out next week, just to keep us all honest here and see what's happening. If I can find it, of course. Maze Runner Death Cure. What? I thought they canceled this movie. Apparently that's coming out this weekend. A couple of tiny little limited releases. And then Hostels is going drama from Entertainment Studios, which is a brand new distribution wing of I don't know who. But they're very new and they're very bad. At least so far. I can't even remember what else they've put out. Like Friend Request, I think. And so I don't know what Hostels is doing. It's not going to make any money because they haven't really advertised it. Maze Runner Death Cure. I have no idea where they went forward with this film. The last one did not do very well from what I remember. Let's take a look real quick. I don't want to spend too much time on this crap. And it is crap. Both of them opened 30-32. The first two, Maze Runner, the original, closed at 102. Second one closed at 81. I can't see this doing any better. Maybe opens at 25, closes out at like 70, something like that. Not really that exciting stuff. It's kind of the whole young adult novel craze that happened like 10 years ago. It's kind of the few remaining remnants of that. And then we're into February. Wow, this is the last weekend of January already. The next weekend after that, February 2nd, Winchester, The House That Ghost Built. I think that's going to do pretty well for a horror film. Doesn't really, it's got some good talent behind it. Helen Mirren. I don't know who Jason Clarke is, but he's listed. He's probably someone famous. I don't know. CBS Films, Lionsgate. I don't know who knows what this is going to do, but the trailers are kind of stupid but fun at the same time. It looks like a total throwaway horror film, but I think it's going to do quite well, actually, because there's nothing else coming out that February. And then we're not quite to the Valentine's Day weekend holiday. The February 9th is pretty crowded. You got 50 Shades. You got 1517 to Paris. That's a Clint Eastwood movie. Clint Eastwood's all about these like true story movies. Sully's been on the TV constantly, and every time it's on, it's like it's really fascinating to watch because it feels like you're watching a mixture of a Lifetime movie, a Discovery documentary, and like a show on the History Channel. Like it's just like it is engaging, but it's not good art and it's not good film at all. I mean, it's not even remotely good. It's actually quite terrible. But it kind of feels just like a stupid TV show. He's like doing this a lot of times. So 1517 to Paris kind of seems like that, but look, people love that shit. They love Clint Eastwood. So I think it's going to do okay. Peter Rabbit's also coming out that weekend. And then I think we're that's like the sort of, as the roller coaster is going clink, 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 clink. And then we're getting to February 16th, which I think is where we're going to hit that peak, here for the winter, or early winter, I should say, late winter. Black Panther opens. Tracking right now, some people threw out 120 for opening weekend, which seems very, very high, but there's a ton of buzz for this film. It's hard to really put into words how much buzz there is. I don't know. I'm so skeptical of comic book movies in general. As always, I always feel like the bubble's going to burst at some point. But Black Panther doesn't seem like it is. I would guess probably 80, 90 would be a good opening weekend projection for that. Kind of in the Thor, Captain America, when those first came out, something like that. But it could, it's apparently the fastest selling pre-sold ticket ever for MC or something. I don't know. They always throw stuff out like that. You have no idea if it's just PR bullshit. It mostly is. The number that got thrown out last week was 120, and then of course all the comic book movie people go insane and they retweet it constantly. It's like, just come on, guys, settle down. It's going to do quite well. And the rest of February is kind of some random stuff, and then we're kind of in the whole new season. Anyway, so I'll be back next weekend to talk a little bit more about what happens next weekend, talk about the holders from this weekend, and maybe I'll show up for a 2017 year review episode this week during the week. We'll see. And anyways, thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wildland Podcast.